Let's get started.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Virtual Houses of Worship Security Program, co-hosted by FEMA Region 2 Individual and Community Preparedness Program and the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. My name is Allison Albright and I'm the Regional Preparedness Liaison for FEMA Region 2. I'm going to provide a few technical considerations before we begin. Today's proceedings are being recorded and captioned. The archived event will be available on the FEMA website in the coming weeks. You should hear audio through your computer speakers, so please ensure your volume is turned up and your speaker icon is green so you can hear the proceedings accordingly. The video function for today is only for presenters. In the lower right-hand corner, we ask if you'd like to receive news and updates from Region 2. If so, please enter your email address and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list. If you would like to see the presentation in a larger screen, you can click the button with 4 arrows facing out in the top right of the presentation pod. We will have a question and answer session after the presentation concludes. You'll see a Q&A pod in the right-hand side. Please feel free to submit your questions about the subject matter there, and time permitting, we'll do our best to answer them. Finally, the PowerPoint presentation from today, along with other resources, will be available for you to download in the file share pod as a PDF at the end of the presentation. You can click on the files and download it using the download button. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Loretta Taylor from the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness to start today's proceedings.
Loretta, you're on mute.
Thank you, Allison. Good evening, and thank you all for attending our Virtual Houses of Worship seminar tonight. My name is Loretta Taylor, and I'm the State Training and Exercise Coordinator with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. We have a lot in store for you this evening, so I would like to briefly share today's agenda. Let me progress my slide. Allison, can you take it to the agenda for me, please? So after the opening remarks from our Deputy Director and the Monmouth County Prosecutor, we will be informed of NJOHSP's Interfaith resources, followed by our federal partners, FEMA, and the Department of Homeland Security. Last but certainly not least, we will learn about cybersecurity considerations as they relate to houses of worship. And finally, we will be answering your questions from the Q&A section, followed by closing remarks and adjourn. So now I am going to introduce our Deputy Director, Andrew Campy. Andrew Campy was named Deputy Director of the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness on December 9, 2019. Mr. Campy's role is to assist the Director in leading the office's mission areas, serve as a principal advisor, and manage the administrative and internal operations of the office. Mr. Campy served in various roles with the FBI for 22 years, most recently as Special Agent in charge of the Intelligence Division for the New York Field Office. In this role, he led the collection, analysis, and dissemination of accurate and actionable intelligence to the United States intelligence community and allied intelligence services. Mr. Campy previously served as a Deputy Assistant Director in the Counterintelligence Division at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Prior to joining the FBI, Mr. Campy was a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army as an attack helicopter aviator. He served in Operation Desert Storm and in Operations Restore Hope and Continue Hope in Somalia. During his military career, Mr. Campy was awarded an Air Medal with Valor and Meritorious Service Medal for his combat actions in Somalia, as well as a Bronze Star Medal and Air Medal during Desert Storm. Mr. Campy received a bachelor's degree in economics from the Virginia Military Institute and a master's degree in management from Webster University. Before he comes on, I would like to remind you all that there's a Start My Webcam button to please don't press on that button because only the presenters are going to be on the camera. So please do not start your webcam. So without further delay, Deputy Director Andrew Campy will provide the opening remarks. Mr. Campy?
Great, thanks, Loretta. I guess first thing I probably should get my photo updated now that I'm sporting a beard, my pandemic beard. Anyway, Loretta, thanks for the nice and kind introduction. And I just wanted to take a minute or two just to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It's great for us to be able to come together, both as a community and as partners. I mentioned the pandemic. Obviously, everyone knows that's going on. I wanted to reassure everyone that despite the pandemic, over the past year, this has been unprecedented. OHS&P has remained fully operational throughout COVID-19, and we remain engaged with our local, state, and federal partners, and that's important. We have adapted our strategies to account for the evolving threat landscape, including response to the pandemic, the civil unrest, and disinformation, all in an effort to support our counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and preparedness mission across the state of New Jersey. As we continue to endure these challenges, houses of worship throughout our communities remain one of our highest priorities for OHS&P. Maybe some of you recently participated in our Interfaith Advisory Council meeting that we had earlier in the week on Monday. New Jersey, the Jersey City attack back in December of 2019, it was my second day in the office, serves as a stark reminder that we must remain vigilant, and we fully recognize that safety and security continue to be of the utmost of importance. To that end, we are excited to offer you the second installment of our virtual Houses of Worship security program. Tonight's presentation is the culmination of a tremendous amount of effort and planning, which has been coordinated with our federal, state, county, and local partners, all to provide you with essential information, resources, and contacts. As you listen to the seminar tonight, we hope that you will walk away armed with the tools you need to increase resilience, readiness, and overall security for your faith-based organization and facility. Finally, please continue, this is important, to continue to follow the proper health guidance, including social distancing and quarantine protocols throughout this upcoming Holy Day season. Both Passover and Easter are coming up soon. The pandemic has required all of us to adjust our traditional holiday festivities over the past year for the sake of public health, and we need to continue to do that. Please remember that at the conclusion of tonight's presentation, this is just the beginning of our conversation, and we look forward to working with all of you to better secure all of our places of worship. With that, what I'd like to do now is to hand this off over to the Monmouth County Prosecutor, Mr. Christopher J. Gramiccioni. Chris?
Thanks, Mr. Campy. It's really a pleasure to work with you all tonight. And I tell you, after a year of this, I'm sure Homeland Security feels the same, as does FEMA. I wish that we could eyeball one another in a room together. I think there's so much lost over Zoom and communications online. So I'm sorry I can't be there in particular on camera, but I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you all and glad that we're focusing on Monmouth-specific houses of worship here. So thank you to Homeland Security for taking this show on the road and bringing it to Monmouth. I probably know some of you, but I've been prosecutor here for nearly 9 years, and I was thinking about this event and how important it is, because we've made it a habit for a number of years in trying to focus on working with our religious leaders to make sure that people can practice religious freedom freely throughout here, and trying to make these places and homes of worship, they make them hardest targets possible. So I was thinking about, I know it's kind of hokey, but I was thinking about the oath that we take, and I'm sure many of you have taken a similar oath, but us in law enforcement, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States as well as the New Jersey Constitution. And it's no surprise to many of you, our founding fathers largely broke away from the English crown to be able to exercise religious freedoms. And that's the reason why the First Amendment is first. It pertains to the exercise of free religion and speech. But the thing is, as many of you know, because unfortunately we see some of these incidents that occur across the state and the region, you can't freely exercise religious freedom if your security is threatened or compromised, which is obviously what brings us here today and what makes this common dialogue and discussion so vitally important. I can attest to you that in Monmouth, our office, the municipal police departments, and the state and federal partners that we work with, we continue to make this a top priority to make sure that your houses of worship are safe so you can practice freely this religious freedom that you are so entitled to do. We want to make those places as hard targets as possible to avoid anybody who might have ill intentions. And I tell you, as a prosecutor, it's one thing, but like Mr. Campy, I've served in the armed forces too. I'm in the Navy. I continue to do so. And I can tell you my focus is on, similar to this, operational international law and conflict and stability operations. And we see this a lot in foreign countries that we assist and participate in. I can tell you from both these positions that I hold that one of the most vital things to ensure in successful missions and operations is what we call flat comms. I bet you Campy remembers that from his Army days. And that's short for flat communications, meaning consistent information sharing across the spectrum to all interested parties. And the reason why flat communications are so indispensable, it's not just for success of mission operations in a military environment, but more for security and protection of people. And that's why it applies here, protection of people who worship at the various churches, synagogues, temples, and mosques throughout Monmouth County. And this isn't something that it's just left to the religious leaders that run these places. It's a collective responsibility, especially in a post-9/11 environment and the environment, unfortunately, we find ourselves in today. So let me bring it a little bit closer to home, and then I won't keep you long because I want to let the experts dive in on the substance of today's presentation. What's happening in Monmouth? So the good news is I'm glad to report that we saw about a 16% decline in the number of suspicious incidents that were reported from 2019 and 18 to 2020. We went down to 80 incidents in 2020, and they affect a number of sectors across the spectrum, most of which were commercial facilities, first responder, police-type services, schools and government facilities. And most of these incidents came in the form of either express or implied threats, typically through electronic communications or otherwise, or internet communications. But on the flip side, which is relevant today, about 10%, or 8 out of the 80 incidents in Monmouth in 2020, had some nexus to a place of worship. We saw, just as a few examples, a telephonic bomb hoax that was made to a church, houses of worship being vandalized with rock throwing and window breaking. We saw a threat made to a temple on their online media account, and one extremely unusual incident where a severed deer head was left on the front porch of a pastor's home. And these are clearly disheartening and intimidating, but if you're looking for a silver lining, thankfully none of them caused any direct danger or injury to people. But that said, we all collectively want to drop these incidents down from 80 to 0. That's the goal here. And to minimize these risks, we have to communicate these safety and security protocols across this broad spectrum to protect our religious facilities. I wish I didn't have to have this type of discussion with you. This is unfortunately the environment that we find ourselves in. But I will end with, it reminds me of, I'm stealing from Thomas Jefferson here. He said, and we get this a lot in the Navy, is the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And what that boils down to is readiness and having information shared widely like we're doing tonight. So I wish you a great training tonight. I'm really grateful for the relationships that we share with the leaders of our houses of worship in Monmouth. I'm especially appreciative of the federal and state partnerships we have with the Homeland Security and Preparedness Office, with FEMA, and all of my municipal police departments that work on the tip of the spear with the religious leaders in the houses of worship across the Monmouth County. And I can promise you this as I close, that our office, the municipal police departments, and these agencies that we worked with, we will continue to stand at the ready to help protect your rights of your congregants to worship freely and without fear of harm or danger. Great honor for me to be with you tonight again. I wish I could look you all in the eye, but I wish you a great training tonight, and thank you for the honor to be able to work with you. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Chris. Izzy?
Thanks, Loretta. Much appreciated. I just want to say thank you to Deputy Director Campy, as well as the prosecutor, for coming on and speaking about the security situations regarding the houses of worship in the state of New Jersey. So I wanted to first start off, I know we throw a lot of acronyms in the government, so I'm going to do a little clearing up on that. So I want to start off with who we are. We're the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. Our office was established back in March in 2006 by then Governor Carey, which actually marks our 15th year anniversary, bringing two portions together, forming the Office of Homeland Security. The one mission is preparedness. That's that emergency planning. And we partner up with the New Jersey State Police Office of Emergency Management, as well as county and local partners on that mission. The other mission, the counterterrorism piece, which I'll go into a little bit later and how that works here in the state of New Jersey. But as time went on and threats have evolved, we also added a third mission to our office, and that's that cybersecurity piece. So a few years ago, we established what's known as the New Jersey Cybersecurity Communication Integration Cell, which is the NJCIC. And what the NJCIC is a division within our office that focuses on cybersecurity, both for the private and public sector. So later on, Krista, who is an intelligence analyst in the NJCIC, will provide a little bit more in-depth presentation on how that works in terms of protecting our critical infrastructure in that cybersecurity realm. So currently, our director, Jared Maples, has been the director for over 4 years now. He was appointed acting director by then Governor Christie and made full director under our current governor, Murphy. Additional to his role as the Director of Homeland Security, he's also the Chief Advisor to the Governor for Homeland Security, very similar to the role played out as an advisor to the President. So I first wanted to start off with what's known as the Interfaith Advisory Council. So the Interfaith Advisory Council was established back in 2012, and what the Interfaith Advisory Council, or the IAC, Deputy Director Campy had mentioned earlier about a meeting that we had earlier this Monday. What it is bringing the elements of that community outreach piece, particularly in that interfaith realm, with law enforcement. And by law enforcement, it's just not the Office of Homeland Security, but it's all our partners, our federal partners, our state partners, our county partners, and our local partners. So back in 2012, we started with a handful of folks with the Interfaith Advisory Council. Over time, by 2018, we have about 250 members. And when in 2018, Director Maples asked me to partake in the Interfaith Advisory Council and help expand it and really push out our resources to the state of New Jersey. We went from 250 members, and as of now, we're close to about 3,500 members. Now, those members expand all 21 counties in the state of New Jersey and also all religious groups. So what are these interfaith resources that we provide? So if you go onto our website at NewJerseyHomelandSecurity.gov and click on the Interfaith tab, you'll see that we provide a broad scope of various resources, including intelligence products. So when we talk about that counterterrorism piece, it's very important to have the public understand what is that current threat environment. So we put out intelligence products, whether it's on domestic terrorism or international terrorism or terrorism related to houses of worship. All that information can be found right on our website. Another factor is that what we do is we provide annual threat assessment. So state of New Jersey is one of the lead agencies that's really on the forefront on that counterterrorism piece. So every year, we actually put out a threat assessment outlining what is the current threat environment, not just on a national level, but also specifically what's here on the state level. We categorize what those threats are here in New Jersey. For example, last year for the first time, we actually did a supplemental because we actually realized that current threat environment started to focus into that DT realm. Now, this is before the attack at the Capitol. We had put out indicating that domestic terrorism is on a rise and in a very, very exponential rise and can turn violent. The third thing I wanted to talk about is we also put out a lot of our resources to our Interfaith Advisory Council Bulletin, and that can be also found on our website. So security assessments. One of the big things in conjunction with our state and local, federal, state, and local partners is that we provide security assessments. So what that is that folks in the law enforcement will go out to your houses of worship, walk through with you, and point out those intelligence gaps. Right? In order to really secure your facility, you have to really understand those intelligence gaps and provide some suggestions and recommendations how to fix those intelligence gaps. All right. So the biggest issues since I've been really doing as the statewide coordinator is money, right? So most of the houses of worship always have that lack of money. How do you really pay for a lot of these things? So what I can say is that the state of New Jersey is one of the lead states in receiving some of these grant funding. The first one I wanted to talk about real quick was the FEMA, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, federal grant program known as the Nonprofit Security Grant Program. Now what that is, it's a federally funded grant program which encompasses the entire United States, all 50 states. And in that, there's a pot of $50 million that's dedicated for houses of worship and nonprofit organizations. So through our office, which administers these grants, so you apply through our office, and what this grant focuses on is target hardening. What does that mean? That means you can use these funds to purchase doors, locks, film on windows, panic alarms, cameras. And every year, we've seen a pretty exponential growth in application process. And again, remember, this is a very competitive grant. So last year, the state of New Jersey received more than $9.5 million. And that's only second to New York by a small fraction. So that is a really considerable amount of money. Now, every house of worship and nonprofit organization could apply for this grant. Last year, the cap amount on the NSGP was $100,000 per organization. This year, it's $150,000 per organization. Now, what is required for the Nonprofit Security Grant Program? Through our website and through our Grants Bureau, we have compiled exactly what you need. You need an investment justification, basically the grant application itself, a vulnerability risk assessment, pretty much what I had discussed earlier about having someone come through and do a physical security of your location. Now, part of that is that you don't necessarily need a physical security assessment because especially in this time of period where the grant application is open, what we have is known as a facility self-assessment tool, which you can download from our website and go through the process yourself, and that is part of the application process. The last requirement is the IRS 501c letter, designating your organization as a nonprofit organization. So the second grant that I wanted to discuss is the New Jersey Nonprofit Security Grant Program. It's structured very similar to the federal NSGP, except the difference here is that it's a two-part application process. What do I mean by that? So you could apply up to $50,000 for that target hardening piece. So it'll cover the same thing as a federal grant in terms of those target hardening items such as doors, locks, cameras, etc. And then you could apply up to $10,000 for security personnel. Now, that security personnel funding is not to hire someone permanently within your organization. It's to supplement your security. So in other words, you can use that money to hire extra duty law enforcement or private security. Now, going back to that counterterrorism piece. So one of the things in New Jersey is very interesting in terms of the law enforcement perspective is that in New Jersey, we have over 540 municipalities with law enforcement powers. We have 21 counties with law enforcement powers. We have numerous state agencies, in this case with the Attorney General's office, the state police, our office, the major law enforcement entities on the state level. And then you have the federal side of things, and particularly related to terrorism, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, and within that, the Joint Terrorism Task Force. So the biggest issue came right after 9/11 was that communication, something that the prosecutor had talked about earlier, where the federal and the local and then federals within had problems in terms of communicating, giving that information up, sharing of that information. And because of this, we developed what's known as the suspicious activity reports. Now, what that is the federal campaign of see something, say something. And what this is not a profiling measure. This is a behavioral measure, meaning that we're not looking to focus on any groups. This is based on behavior. If you see something that's out of the ordinary, report it. And report it to who? So here in New Jersey, because of the issues of the various law enforcement entities from the local, county, state to the federal, is how does that process work? So what we did was we created this thing called the Counterterrorism Coordinator Program. So every municipality in the state of New Jersey has what's known as a Municipal Counterterrorism Coordinator. So when you see this type of suspicious behavior, you go into your local police department or you call 911 and you report it to your local police department. That information gets relayed over to the Municipal Counterterrorism Coordinator. So that particular person will do is funnel it up to the county, and there the county counterterrorism coordinator receives this information, reviews it. That information then goes to what's known as the Counterterrorism Watch. That's an entity within our office, and what it is, it's basically a counterterrorism dispatch, right? So that's manned 24/7, and it is housed what's known as the ROC, the Regional Operations Intelligence Center. So the ROC is the New Jersey Fusion Center. It's overseen by the New Jersey State Police. And once that information is taken in, it gets processed through what's known as the New Jersey Suspicious Activity Reporting Database. So as soon as that information is inputted into the database, what happens is the notification goes out to all the participant parties within the local, county, state, and particularly in this case, the Federal Bureau of Investigation Joint Terrorism Task Force. So because of the FBI JTTF has a first right of refusal, they've reviewed this information, they vet this information, and if it's something that's an ongoing investigation or part of an ongoing investigation, they'll retain that information. And if it's something they want to follow up with or mitigate that particular incident, since they have the first right of refusal, they will follow up with that. And what happens at that point is that if the FBI JTTF does not want to follow up on this, it comes down to the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. And what we do from there is we work with our county and local partners to mitigate the threat. The reason it's important with these SARs, or suspicious activities, is that every single one of these SARs gets mitigated at some level, and we take them very, very seriously. Obviously from last year to now, because of the COVID pandemic and closing down of a lot of facilities, the number of SARs that have been coming in has been reduced. However, obviously because of the cyber portion, a lot of those cyber threats or SARs have increased. Now, we do well over 2,300 SARs per year, and every single one of them is taken in an investigative manner. So finally, this is my contact page information, along with Lieutenant John Page and I. We're the statewide outreach coordinators, so please feel free to reach out to us at any time. In terms of the assessments, I'll be more than happy to facilitate those for you. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I will definitely get back to you. Loretta?
Thank you so much, Detective Izzy. Next, we have Deborah Costa from FEMA.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Debbie Costa. I'm the Community Preparedness Officer for FEMA Region 2, and I want to talk to you a little bit about some resources that FEMA has for houses of worship. We take a different perspective when we're looking at preparedness. We're not looking at it so much in terms of security, but we are looking at it in terms of being prepared for all hazards. So many people don't realize that our mission is to help people before, during, and after disasters, not just, when an event takes place. And our vision is for a prepared and resilient nation. FEMA's strategic plan from 2018 to 2022 outlines 3 primary goals. And I always, find it important to note that our goal 1 for an agency that responds to emergencies, is to build a culture of preparedness. That's our goal 1. And, we invite others to adopt that same goal. And if you don't know what a culture of preparedness is, it is a national effort to be ready for the worst disasters at all levels of government, families, and individuals. It promotes the idea that everyone should be prepared when disaster strikes. But to be prepared, we really must all understand what our local and community risks are, and to reflect the diversity of those we serve and foster partnerships that allow us to connect with a diverse nation. In addition to the agency goals, FEMA Region 2 has adopted some goals specifically for working with houses of worship. Our goals are to empower houses of worship to be prepared for all hazards, whether they're man-made incidents like some of the ones that Izzy spoke of. They could be accidental or intentional, or perhaps it's a natural disaster. In New Jersey, probably the one that we're most susceptible to are hurricanes and floods. So we want to make sure that houses of worship have emergency operation plans, that they understand what that is, that they have continuity of operation plans, or COOP. How will you continue to perform your essential functions should an event impact your facility? We want to make sure that all your staff and your volunteers are prepared. I know when OHS&P does the active shooter workshop, they talk about, what your staff and volunteers could look for in that respect. But you could also make sure that your staff and volunteers are prepared personally in their home, and also that they're prepared at work for anything that might take place. An incident doesn't have to be a national incident. It doesn't have to be, an entire state or community. An incident could just impact one facility. So do you have plans in place if one of those incidents, even if it was very local, were to take place and put your facility out of commission, so to speak? But we also want to make sure that your congregants are prepared, right? We talk a lot about resilience and resilient communities and the ability to bounce back. Well, that starts with the individual and with the family. The more resilient we are as individuals, the more capable we are, the better able we are to recover, and bounce back. I don't know what the new normal is going to look like after this pandemic, but I certainly think that it was an eye-opener, that a lot of people, maybe are thinking, I need to have more than, 2 days of food, or water. So it's a good opportunity to reflect, to make lessons learned, and to plan a little bit better. Make sure that your pets are included in your plans. Consider joining CERT, the Community Emergency Response Teams, especially in New Jersey and in New York City, have been a godsend, I think, to emergency managers. I know that there are a lot of vaccine sites in New Jersey that are taking advantage of their CERTs. I know Burlington County is being run almost entirely by CERT and MRC volunteers. I know CERTs up in Hoboken and Hudson County that have been deployed for over 300 days now. So if you want to encourage your community members, your congregation to get involved, CERT is a good opportunity where they can give back a little bit. Take advantage of the active shooter trainings that OHS&P and others offer. And I'll talk a little bit more later about You Are the Help Until Help Arrives training. It's a great training. It really allows an opportunity for anyone to save a life. And then the last goal that we want to do is we really want to empower you to be able to continue to do what you do. So if during Blue Skies, you offer spiritual guidance, you're a place of worship, you provide a place for people to volunteer, we want you to be able to continue to do that. And if during Gray Skies you transition so that you act as shelter or a feeding facility of some sort, or maybe even a point of distribution, in New Jersey, there are 10 federal sites that FEMA is running with the state for vaccine distribution, and I would say probably half of them, if not more than half of them, are being operated out of churches and various houses of worship. So we want you to be able to continue to do that, and in order for you to do that, there needs to be some planning done in advance. FEMA has a great publication. You're going to have these slides at the end of our presentation today. I believe they're already in the download pod. But this is a guide for developing high-quality emergency operation plans for houses of worship. We've also taken this material in the guide and turned it into a class so that if you want to provide this training for your church and surrounding mosques and temples and synagogues, FEMA will come down and we will provide this for you to give you a jump start, so to speak, on doing an emergency operation plan. Listen, we know that as a pastor or a rabbi, you are wearing many hats. And I'm sure that emergency operation planner or emergency manager maybe was not at the forefront of your mind when you joined the calling. So we're here to help and assist you in any way that we can. We can provide some templates, but this is a 3-hour interactive workshop. Basically talks about developing safety and planning teams, identifying hazards, different components of a plan, some writing courses of action, maintaining the plan. So that's something that we provide. Don't wait until an event to get to know your local first responders and emergency managers, right? You want to build these relationships now. You want to invite these people into your facility. Invite them to a potluck or a picnic. Show them the facility so that if you are impacted at some point, your local first responders and emergency managers have some familiarity with the facility. You Are the Help Until Help Arrives is a fabulous program. We've seen it in action more than once where people have taken this and actually did save a life. The reality of dialing 911, I believe in our area is probably 7 to 9 minute response time, and it only takes half that time to bleed out. So it's very beneficial to learn some of these very, very basic techniques. What kind of information does 911 need when you call? How do you keep yourself safe? How do you keep the injured safe? If someone's obviously was hit by a car and they're in the middle of the street, you're not going to leave them there. So what's the best way to get them to safety? And how do you provide comfort? And how do you stop the bleeding? That's the biggest thing is stopping the bleed. And I know people talk about there's a couple of other different similar programs for bleeding control. They're all great. I would say offer them to your congregants. I know we went into a church in Mercer County, I think in Trenton, and there were over 150 people there. And this is a natural follow-up to an active shooter workshop. Offer these types of programs to your congregants because, it could be the difference between them saving even just their neighbor, a loved one, a spouse, a child. They're really very basic tools. If you have members of your congregation who maybe are an EMT or a retired nurse or a teacher, someone who feels comfortable teaching this, all of the materials for this are online and can be downloaded, and anybody can teach the class. We actually, since COVID, have started doing it virtually, and we do it quarterly, and I believe we have one scheduled for April. Another way we reach out into the community is using our bulletin. We have a preparedness and resilience bulletin. We'll put preparedness tips, and we will add NOFOs, notice of funding opportunities, like when the nonprofit security grant becomes available. Any webinars that we host, we put in there. Any training that we offer in Region 2, it's available to anyone who wants it for free. We have a very robust webinar series thanks to COVID. We had always done one webinar a month. Last year we did 110 webinars. We are in the process of putting together a webinar right now that I think might be of interest to some houses of worship. It's going to be specifically about public assistance grants. So again, being prepared in advance, getting the information. What happens if there's another Sandy this hurricane season? Do you know if your facility is impacted, how to go about applying to the state for relief? And that's going to be on April 14th from 1 to 2:30. And again, you're going to have these slides. There's a link on this particular slide that will take you to all our upcoming webinars. The individual preparedness activities is a good opportunity for you to hold kind of a mini tabletop, or what would you do if. It sets up a scenario. So the storm of the century is about to land on the Jersey shore. You know, what would you do? And I've seen people do this in houses of worship, kind of like on a Saturday or in an assembly room after services, where it gives people an opportunity to sit down and kind of talk to each other. It's not somebody telling them what they have to do. It's people learning from people. They learn from each other. And I always hear something new. You know, this is what I did during Sandy, or this is what I did during the nor'easter. And they learn from each other. And there's actually a dozen different scenarios. We have an answer key, and we even have a facilitator guide. These are individual preparedness activities that everybody should be able to do. The QR codes are here. This is in the download pod. If you would share this with your congregants, it would take us one step closer to resilience. I wanted to very quickly mention that that FEMA Region 2 has formed a vaccine confidence task force. Vaccine confidence has been an issue and will be, especially in some of the vulnerable populations. It came down from the FEMA administrator that we're to support CDC. I actually co-lead this task force. So we have been reaching out to VOADs, COADs, VALs. I know OHS&P was great. If you did attend or got the invitation to the last IAC meeting, then you would have seen some additional resources in there. We're looking to get accurate, reliable information into the hands of individuals who are hesitant. You know, I don't know if somebody is dead set against the vaccine, if we'll change their mind, but I'm certainly hoping that the ones that are on the fence about it, that we're able to give them accurate information so that they can make educated decisions that are best suited for them. And just some of the different efforts that we've been doing with this outreach. You know, we've had a few webinars. We do have another webinar that we're in the process of planning with the Region 2 Health and Human Services. We've been emailing out different things like 6 ways you can help build COVID-19 confidence. We sent out some frequently asked questions about the vaccine last week, vaccine site information, and we've also been having them translated. So we had requests, and we had them translated into 6 additional languages besides English. So if there's a language that you would like to see some of this information in, I could probably get it translated. And we've actually been making phone calls to houses of worship and community-based organizations, just following up, saying, hey, did you get this information? You know, is this something that you're willing to share with your congregants? You know, is there anything else that we can do to help you to build confidence in your community? So that's my presentation. Here's my contact information. If you have any questions, you know, you could type them in the Q&A, or if you think of something after the fact, don't hesitate to email me directly. Thanks so much. Have a good night.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Andrew Smith. I'm the Protective Security Advisor for New Jersey. I'm a federal DHS guy, and I'll explain what that means in a little bit, but hopefully I'm not overly caffeinated right now and talk too fast. I'm sure the presenter chat will let me know that I'm talking too fast. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so I talk with my hands, and I talk a little bit too fast, so I apologize for that. So my background, retired military. I did Marine Corps and Air Force, 24 years total. And after I retired, I was lucky enough to jump on with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security for 9 years. I was a special investigator for 9 years with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security. And then the federal government made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I jumped over to the federal side, to Federal Department of Homeland Security. So what we want to talk about tonight is more of a national look, because not every state has a robust team that you have here in New Jersey. Many states don't have the programs in place that New Jersey offers. So if you're a New Jersey congregation, you are in very good shape as far as agencies are willing to help you. I want to talk about one of these new tools and new programs and the webpage to get more information. I've seen people log in from Connecticut, Texas tonight, so this information is applicable to you. There is also information how to get hold of my counterparts in Connecticut, Texas, throughout the country. There is one of us in every state and territory as a minimum, and we are there to help connect you with those helping organizations, those first responder organizations, and to get you training. But we work very closely with New Jersey, the local, county, state, and other federal partners that you've heard from on this call already. So let me move forward a little bit and talk about some of the programs that are available to you from the federal side, and to help make your house of worship more secure. So federal DHS has established a faith-based community resource page. This is where you can find almost one-stop shopping for information on how to secure and prepare your house of worship. We've learned there's probably over 400,000 congregations throughout the United States of America and the territories. We can't get to everywhere, right? There's what we call in the military high demand, low density. There's only so many police, so many Homeland Security people who can help you do the assessment of your facility, to walk through with you, to offer you training, offer you tools. So we established this webpage to give you almost a one-stop shop to gather information. We always recommend you start local. Much like politics, all terrorism tends to be local, so that engagement with that local sheriff, local police department, local fire department, EMS, those are the people you really want to engage with first and get that hometown connection with. But this is a web link. If we love these long web addresses in the federal government. If you just Google CISA, is CISA, which let me explain what that is. So Department of Homeland Security has multiple divisions, everything from the Secret Service down to Transportation Security Administration. We are a newer branch of DHS. CISA stands for the Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Security Agency. Say that 3 times. So Cybersecurity, Infrastructure Security Agency. It's a blend of cyber and physical, because as the world becomes more connected, that framework is becoming more and more tight, and the blurred lines between physical security and cybersecurity meant we needed to develop a new approach to security. So when you go to that web page, this is the landing page, and this will walk you through how to do your own self-assessment. Izzy mentioned that the state of New Jersey has a facility self-assessment tool, which is fantastic. I helped write it back in the day, so I take a little ownership to it. But the federal government realized that there was that need for other areas to have that ability to self-assess your faith-based organization. And why is that? Again, I mentioned there's a lot of faith-based organizations in the country. There's a limited supply of police and other security professionals to do a outreach, to do a walkthrough with you. So we wanted to empower the faith-based organizations. I'm a big fan of, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but teach a man to fish, you feed him for life. And that's what we want to do with these faith-based organizations, is to empower you, take charge of your security, and make improvements using the talents within your congregation. We tried to make it easy. We geared it towards the non-security professional, try to eliminate the jargon, the terms that are used in the security world, and make it very easy to understand, very easy to fill out. So the first step in the process is we always recommend you gather a team, right? It's all about teamwork. It's all about the talent you have in your congregation. So look into your congregation and who do you have? Do you have policemen, retired police, firemen? You have, locksmiths who can help you out, carpenters, metal workers. Form that team, who can look at your facility, be part of a team, and do these assessments for you. We always say, hey, involve, like I said before, the local police. If they can come out and help you with this, fantastic. In New Jersey, for sure, you reach out, you usually get the locals, the county, state, and the federal to come out and see you if we can get out there. We come heavy in New Jersey. So there's a lot of helping organizations, like I mentioned, in New Jersey, but sometimes we can't get to everybody, and this is an option for you to do your own self-assessment. I mentioned I'm a protected security advisor. So I'm a non-regulatory guy. I can't compel anybody to do anything. I work through collaboration. I'm a liaison, if you will, between the local, county, and state partners. There's one of us, like I mentioned, at least one in every state and territory in the United States. We bring training to the states. We have exercises. We do security assessments of everything from casinos to bridges and everything in between. So we span across 16 different sectors. I mentioned we had people from different areas outside New Jersey. If you look below here, there's a email address, central@cisa.gov. That is our 24-hour, 365 watch desk. And if you are looking to connect with PSA in your state, you email that office there, tell them where you live or where your organization is and what you're looking for, and they will reach out to what we call the regional director. The regional director oversees the PSAs. We have chemical security inspectors, and we have some cybersecurity people as well. But that address right there will get you connected with your PSA in your applicable state. So over the years, House of Worship security has become a big deal. We have a guide now. And you can just Google DHS House of Worship Security Guide, and this should come up for you. So what this guide is looking at 10 years of attacks on houses of worship how they were done, what the techniques were. There's case studies. So case studies, if you're not familiar, are reviews of an attack. What happened, how did attackers do it, what weak points did they exploit. Case studies are very important in the military and police world. We learn from them, as you should too, to figure out how these threat actors were able to attack religious institutions. And you can learn from that and look at your facility through the eyes of an attacker, which is what I tend to do when I go out and pay a visit to a facility. I think to myself, how can I take this place down? How can I get in? This guide will give you some ideas of what to look for, give you some, again, case studies on things that have happened in the past and how you can, learn from those incidents that occurred. So the guide recommendations, we again, that holistic approach, not done in a vacuum. It's done as a team. You bring different talent into to help out. You'd have a leader. Everybody can't be the chief. You want to be the leader. You're the leader, and you also have people who work for you. You can't have everybody try to manage this project. So you want to delegate who's going to be in charge and who's going to assign people different jobs to do. Again, holistic, bring the talent in that you have from your congregation. Okay, second step is actually joining the assessment. And like I mentioned before, reach out to a local, county, state first responder to see if they can help you with it. Use this tool, and I'll walk you through what it looks like in a minute. It's very user-friendly, like I mentioned, and it'll give you a report at the end that you can use to make improvements. The things you get at the end, you get an executive report they can use to brief out the House of Worship leadership. You get a listing of action items. If you're honest with yourself and you go through this report and ID issues that you're having with your facility, be honest, write them up, and then they'll also give you links to help fix those problems. If you don't have an active shooter plan, below that, if you mark, I don't have an active shooter plan, there is a link to a template on how to start on an active shooter plan. So we want to give you like, hey, here's the issue, I identified it, and here's how I'm going to fix it. So it's 4 areas that we look at: security and safety management, perimeter security, parking and barriers, access control, closed circuit TV, and intrusion detection. Those are the 5 building blocks of this assessment, the 5 areas that we look at here. So as you can see on this page, there's from very low to very high. Very low meaning, hey, I don't have cameras, I don't have an active shooter plan, to very high, hey, I do have an active shooter plan, I rehearsed it, I conduct exercises, I've reviewed it with the local police. So there's a very high and a very low. You grade yourself. And if you look down below here, there's a link to more information to help you if you are in a lower, medium to low category, to help you on the road to success. It's 49 total questions. Now, Izzy, you briefed about grants, so you talked about the facility self-assessment. From what I understand, this report can be used in New Jersey for grant requests or grant funding, for your application package. But Izzy, just take that as a note for after action. I know my partner, Dan Schultz, has talked to your grants department, and they affirmed that, yes, you can use this tool for your grant program. So it's great to identify the areas that you're weak in, but now you have to make efforts to improve. So you want to review what you learned. You want to prioritize open items that you found, and you want to conduct training well. So we always recommend hit that low-hanging fruit, as we call it, and make those corrections that you can make low cost, no cost, trimming the bushes around your doorways, fixing that lock, repairing that window, things that don't cost a lot of money but add value to your security. Training is important, and exercising is important as well, because you can train to a standard, but if you don't test that standard, you don't know how well your people are going to, how well your people are going to react in a situation, and you want to make sure you have good information in their head. The next thing, our new program we have is the Power of Hello. So the Power of Hello is a guide, a new technique that we've offered to houses of worship and private industry to empower your employees to make that connection, say hello to somebody, and gauge that reaction they get. They're like the first line of sensors out there for your facility. The Power of Hello, again, just Google DHS Power of Hello, and this page will come up. There's reference material, there's downloadable material, and it's all free. Again, you pay for it every 2 weeks out of your paycheck. And we mentioned, like I mentioned, test your improvements, and it's a continuous cycle. When you test, you might learn something that you improved didn't work quite so well, and you have to go back and make improvements to that and then test it again. It's a continuous cycle. It's not static. You want to make sure you're always looking to improve your security. This is the webpage, faith-based organizations, and again, I would say Google DHS faith-based organizations, and you'll get all the information you want. Here we are. There's two of us in New Jersey. Dan Schultz covers what I call quick check country, which is North Jersey, and I am the South Jersey guy. I'm a Wawa guy. So if you have a Wawa in your town primarily, I'm your guy. Dan is more the quick check territory. Our contact information is here. You can get us through Loretta or Izzy, or I know Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office on here. We work closely with them every day. Pretty much I'm talking to Jeff Wilbert all the time on issues going on in Monmouth and things we can do to make things better. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for your time. Loretta, thank you, and I'm going to throw it back to you.
Thank you so much, Andy. And now we will have Krista Valenzuela with the NJ Kick.
Good evening, everybody. Hopefully my camera will readjust. I don't know why it always does my face so close, but you're welcome, I guess. So here we are. We're going to be discussing cybersecurity this evening. Now, some of the topics that I'll be discussing with you all is going to kind of run the gamut between how it can impact you personally in your day-to-day lives as well as your houses of worship. If you don't know who the NJKIC is, we are part of the Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, and we fall underneath their cyber division. So that's kind of the point of view I'm coming from today. We'll discuss the threat environment as it currently stands, and that includes ransomware, credential compromise. When I say credential, what I mean is your username or email address and your password, and how that relates to data breaches and the impact there. Social engineering, exploiting public interest, and then achieving digital resilience. A lot of the time what we want is for us all to be secure in cyber. Staying 100% secure 100% of the time is unrealistic, particularly as it pertains to cyber. So we want to maintain as much resiliency to these different threats as we can. And then I'll go a little bit into what the NJ can help you with. So we've had a lot of challenges this past year, and cybersecurity is one of them. And this hits many different people from many different organizations, doesn't matter what sector you're from. Just for school alone, the cybersecurity challenges of trying to do remote learning, and then just doing remote work in general, what that means, what kind of threats those introduce. So we have several resources available on our website that address these. We see different tactics that are being used over this past year, and the changes that these threat actors, these hackers have made to adjust to make their efforts more successful this past year. So ransomware. The ransomware is another pandemic that we've been dealing with for several years now. Ransomware does not discriminate against, it could be a multi-million-dollar Fortune 500 company, it could be a mom-and-pop shop down the street, it could be an individual that is hit with ransomware. It doesn't matter if you are even from a tech institute like Stevens Institute in New Jersey. They were also hit with ransomware. So we all need to be prepared for this, and your houses of worship need to be prepared for what could happen if you are impacted by ransomware, and really prepare for hopefully reducing the impact if you are victimized. We have, this is another resource we have on our website. We do address ransomware along with the other cyber threats through our weekly bulletin that comes out on Thursdays, and I can kind of go more into that at the end. Ransomware evolution. So we've seen a lot of changes over the past several years. 5 years ago, you may have been hit by ransomware and there might be a decryption tool available, and that would allow you to get all of your data back without paying the ransom. That is not the case anymore. Few and far between do we have an actual tool to help these victims. So that's going to be why I'm going to talk about data backup. Even more important now than they were a couple years ago. But some of these new trends that we've been seeing are that actually what changed in the fourth quarter of last year was interesting. Up until the third quarter of 2020, the ransom amounts had always increased, and always increased by quite a bit. The fourth quarter of last year, we actually saw the average ransom demand reduced by like 34%, I believe it is. And it was interesting because I believe it's actually because they're hitting more and targeting more small to medium-sized businesses and organizations, which I think the house of worship would probably fall under that. And the reason there is because I think a lot of these larger corporations, larger organizations have more resources to devote to cybersecurity. So they might be more prepared for a ransomware incident and therefore less likely to pay if they are victimized. These small to medium-sized businesses have less resources or maybe less prepared, and if they're already struggling as it is, a lot of these from the pandemic, and then if they're hit with ransomware and they might be downtime for their work might be a week, how much losses is that? Like, what are the losses that would be incurred if you can't do business for a week? So they might be more likely to just pay so they can get back up and running. Even though the ransom amount decreased, it's still over $150,000 on average, which is quite a bit of money. The top attack vectors, there was a change here as well. For a very long time, RDP compromise was the top attack vector. What I mean by RDP compromise is remote desktop protocol. It's one of the ways in which, say you're working from home and you need to access a resource, documents, data that's on a work network. You would use something like RDP to be able to gain access to that network even though you're not on site. So this, and throughout 2020 up until the fourth quarter, RDP was the main way in which these hackers would get onto a network. They would exploit that connection that's available, get onto a network, and then drop or deliver the ransomware payload. So now we're seeing phishing has increased. And I think that goes hand in hand with the targeting of more small to medium-sized businesses. You'll see in a later slide changes that have occurred with RDP that may have pushed these hackers to go more towards phishing as the attack vector. The total cost of ransomware just from 2020 alone is $20 billion. And that's not including all of the potential losses for downtime that's incurred from these businesses not being able to provide services or provide goods. Data exfiltration. This is another trend that we saw really gear up in 2020. It's now extremely prevalent. And what I mean by these data exfiltration inclusions is that these threat actors, when they're able to hack or gain access to the network, what they're doing is stealing data and then delivering the ransomware. This allows them to then hold that data that they've stolen hostage, essentially. So it's a double extortion tactic where they've not only locked the resources available on that network, that's what ransomware is, they're just locking all of those services and data. They're also saying you're not going to get that data back, and then if you don't pay the ransom, we're also going to publicly release the data that we stole from your network. Why is this problematic? Well, if that business or organization has protected information, like personally identifiable information, think your social security number, or protected health information, or intellectual property, if that's not safeguarded on that network and they've stolen it, if they release that data, the protected information in particular, they could also incur fines on top of the ransom, the cost of the ransomware incident. So we're seeing that in 70% of cases, data exfiltration is a part of that incident. Healthcare is a top targeted industry. This was throughout 2020. Even prior to that, they were a higher up targeted sector. And this is, of course, for 2020, they've already been, bombarded with things to do and, lack of resources, that if they were hit with ransomware, they're probably more likely to pay because they just need to get back up and running. They can't afford to have any downtime at this point. Professional services, what they mean by that is like IT service providers, managed service providers. So a lot of small to medium-sized businesses and organizations don't have internal IT teams or IT security teams, so they outsource that. So they have a third party that provides those services to them. Well, these hackers target those those professional services because once they gain access to an IT service provider, to their network, they can then target all of their clients. So by gaining access to one, they can now have multiple victims. This is just another image about the, number one, the median number of employees, so 234, that's pretty small. That's the median number of employees of the organizations that are targeted by ransomware, and this is just from that fourth quarter of 2020. And then you can see the changes in the tactics of the attack vectors for each of those. Ransom payments, this is just a nice chart to see like how exponentially these ransom amounts have grown over the past several years. One of the things that the NJKIC does is it ingests incident reports. So in most cases, there's no obligation to report a cybersecurity incident to us. This is voluntary. So we're just getting a very small snapshot, essentially, of what we're seeing throughout New Jersey. And over 50 reports of ransomware were provided to the NJKIC in 2020 alone. And we see the same kind of trends that we're seeing across the board from other organizations that have reported out on these different incidents. The ransom amounts increasing, the sophistication getting better, having to deal with those double extortion tactics of stealing that data first, targeting healthcare and small to medium-sized businesses, and the same attack vectors as well. I had alluded to this before, so I had talked about remote desktop protocol before, RDP. Prior to the pandemic, there was around 25,000 systems that had RDP open and accessible to the internet. That's not a best practice. That really shouldn't be the case. And once, obviously, there was all these people working from home, these companies started opening up RDP to the internet. So we had even more systems, over 6,000 more systems in New Jersey alone were connected, were open to the internet. When I just checked this month, it's down to 19,000, a little over 19,000. So that's almost 6,000 less than before the pandemic, when people were working from home. That's great. I'm glad that people are securing these systems, and it might be part of the reason that, as I said before, RDP was the top attack vector for many years. And then now, in that last quarter of 2020, we saw that phishing became the top attack vector. And the reason might be this, is that people are actually securing RDP on their networks and making them not available via the internet, which is good. Remote access security, I won't go too far into this because it's a little bit more technical, but it's stressing the use of multi-factor authentication something called virtual private networks. And we go more into this in that tips for teleworkers remote access security document. Again, these slides will be made available, so you can click on that and review that resource. And then configuring and securing a home Wi-Fi network. This we've had on our website for quite some time, but I like to stress it because, number one, a lot of us are working from home still, and it's always good to have a secure home Wi-Fi network. And so that's another resource for you. It gives you step-by-step the types of privacy and security controls that should be on a Wi-Fi network. Phishing best practices. So I'm hitting on this now because of the attack vector for ransomware, but it's applicable when we go into social engineering as well. Unsolicited emails. If you get an email that you didn't expect and or from an unknown sender, do not open attachments, do not click on links. Even if you open an attachment from a known sender, somebody you think you know, and it asks you to enable macros or enable content, it'll be a line at the top of the document. A lot of the times this is a Word document. Do not enable macros. The reason for that is that macros are one of the top ways that malware is delivered onto a system. If you get that message and you think it's coming from somebody that you know, verify this with the person that you think sent it to you, that this is legitimate. You need to have macros enabled. Macros are really only common, semi-common, with Excel files. If you get it in a Word document, in almost all cases, that's not right. So always double check that. Never give remote access to your device from somebody or some organization that you aren't aware of. This is how a lot of tech support scams circulate and kind of keep going. I have a case study, but it's an example of an incident that happened recently. It was like a tech support type scam, and there's many things that could happen after you've given remote access to your device, and nothing good. And then check for signs of email spoofing. So we do have another document about how to spot a spoofing. So email spoofing is essentially just making the email look like it's coming from somebody that you know or trust. And ABC, always be cautious. Data backups, like I mentioned before. So when you have data backups, they should be kept off of your network. So they should have the ability to be off of, like, not connected to the internet at all. So that could be, personally, if you're doing this in your home life, it could be a USB drive even, just something as small as that, or some sort of external hard drive. You connect it to your device, move any documents or photos, whatever it is over, and then you disconnect it. It's easy, pretty easy peasy when it's just for you. For an organization business, it becomes a little bit more difficult, but it's something that you really have to do to help protect against the impact of a ransomware incident. Make sure that they're tested, and multiple copies are always better. Credential compromise. So this is actually one of those word charts that we took from several data breaches the information is public. It's available on the open internet. You can download it, which is something that we did. And then if you look at the passwords that have been released or exposed in the past several years breaches, you'll see that the ones that you think will be the most popular are the most popular password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But then you start to look a little bit closer and you see that there are words that could be associated with maybe a profession like teacher, school, that sort of thing, and it might be easier to guess what that individual's password might be based on what their job is. Why do we talk about credentials, and why do we always refer to them as the keys to the kingdom? So you'll see here, this is a website called Have I Been Pwned. You can put in your email address and it will let you know if your email address has been exposed in any data breach, public data breach, and then if so, what information was also revealed. So you might not be able to see, it might be too small, but at the bottom one there is MyFitnessPal. So I'm going to pick on MyFitnessPal for a second. So in that data breach, it occurred in 2018. This is a very old email address of mine. My email address, my password, and my IP address, and I think one other thing, username, was revealed in that breach. I might think to myself, okay, well, with MyFitnessPal, I didn't purchase anything. It's a free app. My information that's going to be there is going to be limited. My name, my first and last name, and then the information that they put down there. Well, if I'm using that same password, though, for a more sensitive account, then a hacker could take that information that's been exposed and access a different account, maybe that does have that more sensitive information, could be used in identity theft schemes, could be used to gain access to like a financial account, that sort of thing. So there's multiple issues with the credential compromise, the data breaches, exposures, and when I talk about it, I'm always going to mention multi-factor authentication. When I talk about account compromise in general, I'm going to talk about multi-factor authentication. It's also called two-factor authentication, and it's the combination of at least 2 of 3 factors. One of them is almost always going to be something that you know, like your password. And then the other 2 might be something that you are, like a biometric, a fingerprint, or something that you have. And that's typically a code. A lot of people use the SMS-based, text message-based codes. Having MFA, multi-factor authentication, enabled in general is going to be better than not. If you are going to choose a code, we highly recommend using an authentication app like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, or there's also things called hardware tokens over SMS text-based codes. Text-based codes, there are ways to kind of work around that to try to still gain access to your account, but having MFA enabled, you're not the lowest hanging fruit, so you're probably not going to be targeted anyway, but I always like to mention that as well. So why is multi-factor authentication so important? The reason here is we're going to follow this scenario. Okay, you trust XYZ company with your password. When you create an account with anybody, you're trusting them to safeguard that information that you provide them. That doesn't always happen. It's not always safeguarded. They could be breached. They could be, it could be through negligence. It could just be through a hacker actually targeting them and stealing their data. Either way, say XYZ company is breached, passwords are exposed, email address and password combinations are exposed. That data breach information comes available online. It could be up for sale. It could just be posted online on a dark web forum, whatever it is. Criminals then take that information and then try to gain access to your more sensitive ABC account using XYZ credentials. If you use that same password and you don't have MFA enabled, multi-factor authentication enabled, then they've just gotten access to your account. If you do have MFA enabled, however, they're going to need that second factor to gain access to your account. If they don't have that second factor, then they don't gain access. It's as simple as that. That's why it's one thing that you actually have control over, even though you've provided XYZ company with your trust to safeguard that information, they didn't do it. This is something that you personally can do to make sure that your account is more secure. Social engineering. So I'll go a little bit into this, and I'm going to go into that example that I mentioned before. So social engineering essentially is just convincing somebody to take an action that you want them to. A lot of social engineering schemes are not very technical in nature, so the hackers behind them don't have to be very technical. It's really just a matter of convincing somebody to do something. So phishing is the most basic. That's like your Nigerian prince scams from years ago, casting a very wide net, hoping that a couple will take the bait. Vishing is voice-based phishing. So this would be like an IRS scam where they call you and say that you owe back taxes, that sort of thing. And then tech support scams also fall under vishing. Spear phishing is more targeted. So they might know from your LinkedIn profile that you are in HR. So they target you with some sort of direct deposit scam. So that's more targeted spear phishing. And whaling is pretending to be somebody higher up in the company, the big fish. And what they're using there is a sense of authority. A lot of gift card scams will perpetrate pretending to be somebody's boss. So in these gift card scams, a lot of the time it's sending a subordinate who would be a subordinate an email saying, can you go out and buy XYZ gift cards, $500, $1,000 worth, and I'll pay you back. I'm in a meeting right now. I can't run out. Just send me the codes in the back of the cards, and I'll pay you later. Business email compromise, this could include invoice-based scams in which somebody pretends to be a vendor of an organization and says, okay, well, here's the invoice that is attached. You owe me this amount of money. Wire it to this account. This is surprisingly successful. They can use email spoofing to pretend like they're coming from that vendor, and then they'll just wire that money. Wiring money is very easy to, then once it's wired to one bank account, then you can wire it to another, and then you drain that account. It's very hard to get your money back. These numbers actually just came out. It's from the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, IC3. They do a crime report every year. So for 2020, there was $4.2 billion in losses from the cybercrime that was reported to them. So only the complaints that they received. So the number is going to be more than this because not everybody reports. Just in extortion tactics alone, nearly $71 million in losses, and $5 million of that is from residents of New Jersey. These extortion tactics are not ransomware. I'm not talking about ransomware here. What I'm talking about is which several of you might have gotten these. It's a hacker purports to be to have compromised your account, sends an email saying, I've compromised, or not compromised your account, compromised your device. I have access to your device. I've recorded you going to adult content websites, and I'm going to send this video to all of your contacts unless you pay me. Well, and a callback to those data breaches I mentioned, they also include that individual's password. It might be a current password. It could be an old password, but it is legitimate. So what they've done is they've taken the information from all of those data breaches that have occurred and then emailed that individual and used that password that was exposed in that breach. It lends credence to that email, makes it seem legitimate, and then people are more likely to pay. And then $1.86 billion, that's B with a billion with a B, in losses from those business email compromise type scams. So pretending to be the vendors. This also includes payroll diversion scams, or they're also called the direct deposit scams. In these cases, it's somebody pretends to be an employee of an organization or company, emails their HR or whoever is in charge of payroll, and either asks for or provides that direct deposit change form and diverts that person's payroll, the direct deposit, to a different bank account that they control. Lots of losses there, $43.45 million in losses from residents of New Jersey. And then over $146 million in losses, $3.8 million in New Jersey from tech support scams. That is up 171% from 2019. And then 28,500 complaints related to COVID-19, which is actually lower than I expected. So this one is, this is a phishing email. It's pretending to be a training, ironically, a cybersecurity training reminder. This attempted to be delivered to a New Jersey state employee. It was blocked by our email security. This one, PayPal. These are very common. That link that's included would have led that individual to a web page that looked like the PayPal login page. If that individual entered their username and password and submitted it, it would probably bring them to the legitimate PayPal login page. And when they press submit on that page before, once they press submit, that information, the username and password, went over to that hacker, and then they were just redirected to the legitimate page. So this makes the individual seem, it makes it appear to them like, oh, I just put in the wrong password and then I just have to put my credentials in again. So it looks less suspicious. But PayPal is a top targeted company. What do you do if, say, either PayPal or if you're targeted with the Office 365 login and you've provided that information, or you think that your email account has been compromised in some way? If you think a hacker has gotten access to your email account, of course, change your password. Enable multi-factor authentication. I'm probably going to mention it like a million times tonight, but very important. And then check auto forward rules. What these hackers do is once they've gained access to an email account, they put in auto forward rules to another email account that they maintain access to. So that even if you change your password, they'll still receive those emails that are being sent to your account. And then also check reply to rules. So reply to rules will have any replies to emails that you send go to a different email account. So say I email my mom replies, it's not going to go to my email address, it's going to go to another one when she presses reply. Email spoofing. I akin email spoofing and the ease of which to do this to a piece of postal mail. So you're sending a piece of physical mail. On that envelope, you have to put the legitimate address of where you want that mail to go, or else it's just not going to get there. The return address, however, I can put whatever I want. I don't have to put my true mailing address in there. I can put anything. And it's the same thing with email, and that's how much you should trust it. And by that I mean don't. So if anything ever seems off, particularly if there's any sort of request for money or for sensitive information, always verify those requests with who the sender appears to be. Exploiting public interest. Actually, before we get there, I don't know if I put it in this slide deck. There is, I'm going to go back a little bit here. So I mentioned the tech support scams. We had an incident report from January come in, and it was a woman, an older woman, who was targeted with this scheme. She received, and her screen on her device made it seem like her device was locked by Microsoft support. She had a virus on her device, and she needed to call the number in order to talk to the fraud department. So she called the number, and that person put her in contact with somebody else that she needed to speak to with Chase Fraud Protection, who also worked for the FBI. Apparently there was some issue with her system, and somebody had gained access to her device. There was malware on it, and for her safety, they needed to move the money in her investment account out of her account so they could conduct their investigation, and they would hold her money safe until the investigation was complete, and then they would give her money back. They contacted her every single day, kept her up to date on their progress, and then once all of that money was out of her account, they ceased communication. She couldn't contact them any further. And that's when she really realized that this was a scam. This is a surprisingly common thing that happens. This was pretty elaborate, I would say, and they stole over $800,000 from this woman's investment account, essentially her life savings for the most part. The problem here, too, is that it was not reported to us immediately. It was about 5 weeks later. If we're lucky and somebody has stolen money and put it into a new account through the FBI and Secret Service, you can maybe get some or all of your money back in a few days, I think maybe a few weeks at the absolute most. So this woman likely won't get her money back. If you ever get into a situation, she also gave remote access to her device to those individuals. Talk to somebody, even just do a Google search somewhere about, like, if something seems funny, it'll pop up immediately that this is a tech support scam or something similar. This is going to be my case now of what I tell people. These can have really big impacts. And so maintaining awareness of these different tactics and threats tactics and techniques that these hackers are using is vitally important for making sure that your data and your money remain safe and your information remains safe. So exploiting public interest. This is just really the past year, 2020 into 2021. We've very clearly seen that hackers have changed their tactics, changed the themes included, particularly in social engineering schemes like phishing and spear phishing, to go hand in hand with public interest. So COVID-19, they created fraudulent websites that were supposed to be related to COVID-19 as information sources. Many of them were malicious in nature. The targeting of VTC, so video teleconferencing platforms, not only with Zoom bombing and things like that, but also emails. And I think I might have an example here, pretending to be including a link to Zoom or another VTC platform for a meeting that you missed, something like that. And that link that was included would be malicious. Targeting of remote access, so that RDP compromise. When the election really started ramping up, we saw a lot of phishing emails about that. The stimulus, anytime there might be a stimulus payment. We start seeing changes there. The vaccine has been a big one, not only with hackers, but also just disinformation campaigns. And then unemployment benefits. You might get an email that's supposedly about your opportunities for unemployment benefits. So if you click here, you can get an extra however much money per week for unemployment benefits, that sort of thing. So here you can see this is just a good example of how quickly you start to see these changes in tactics. So this is based on emails that were attempting to be sent to New Jersey State employees. These were all blocked. And any reference in the subject line to COVID-19, coronavirus, any of the pseudonyms that we use to describe it, if any of those are included in the subject line, they would pop up on this chart. So you see here, I think this is about March 19th or 20th, that you see this huge spike, this is from last year, in these malicious emails attempting to be sent to New Jersey State employees. Well, if you look at what was happening around that time, I think we all remember. March 18th, the CDC report shows that, you know, we originally thought this was like the elderly were the ones that were dying from this, not anybody else. And then the CDC started reporting that no, that's not the case. And then on the 19th, we surpassed that 10,000 infection mark, which seems shockingly low right now. But that was like a big marker that we hit. So you start to see that this is really spreading across the entire United States. So the number of emails also spiked at that time. And then this is that example of, subject line, missed call, sender Zoom. This is an example of that email spoofing that I mentioned before. Not only is there display name spoofing, so it says it's from Zoom, it also has in the carrots that I think that's a legitimate email address of Zoom when they send you an update or information. So that's all been spoofed. That's all been changed. And then that link, if you clicked it, would have probably led you to a Zoom login page, and then they would have stolen the Zoom credentials of that individual. So achieving that digital resilience. I talked a lot about the different threats that we're seeing, and I've peppered in things that you can do, right? But these are like the main ones that I want you to take away from this evening. Changing default credentials, I haven't really talked about this throughout the presentation, but smart homes are absolutely a thing, and a lot of us are introducing connected devices to our homes, refrigerators. There's stoves that are internet connected now, and then we have, you know, your HVAC system type stuff, Nest cameras, all of those. Changing those default credentials, so change the password that comes with that device when you plug it in for the first time. The reason you should do this is because default credentials, the manufacturer-based credentials, are available online. They're in like the user manuals, so anybody and everybody can find that out, and then they can hack into your device. Enable multi-factor authentication. I told you I was going to say it a bunch of times tonight. Then keeping hardware and software updated. When you get that notice that you have an update for your phone, for your application, always update it as soon as possible. Those updates plug holes or vulnerabilities in that hardware or software, and you want those plugged so that hackers can't exploit them. Thinking before you click on links or open attachments. Vitally important to just take a step back and think if you really should be clicking that link or opening that attachment. Verifying requests for sensitive information. So make sure, or transfers of money. So like I said before, if you have any question as to the legitimacy of something like that, just contact that individual via separate means of communication. So call them, don't email them back. And then navigate to sites directly, not via links. So navigate to Zoom or to Amazon or to Office 365 by typing that URL in your browser instead of clicking the link. And then also just maintain that education. And that leads me into the NJKIC. So we are the state's one-stop shop for cybersecurity information sharing, threat analysis, and incident reporting. We are a free service. So if you become an NJKIC member, which you can do on our website, you will get the weekly bulletin that comes out on Thursdays. It came out earlier today. And then you can request presentations and trainings. I can do something more tailored to your house of worship if that's what you want. You want to have your congregants there to maintain that awareness of these different cyber threats. We can do that. The rest of this is available on our website. We have so many resources on our website. And so even if you don't become a member, you have access to all of that. And it goes through the gambit of different cyber threats that we're seeing, also just different topics within cybersecurity so that you can maintain awareness of those. And I'll put our information up so that you can take it down if you'd like. So cyber.nj.gov, that's where you can sign up to become a member there as well. And then the rest of it is our contact information. We're also available on social media. And I will put, I don't think there's a chat for me to put my personal information in, but if you need it, please let one of us know. I will provide that information out. Thank you very much. I don't know if we're doing questions now or at the end, but if you have any, just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Krista. That was very thorough. Thank you so much. And yeah, we will do questions now. It's going to be moderated by Deborah.
Hi, everyone. First question looks like it's for Izzy. Is the application for the OHS&P nonprofit security grant, are they both the same, the state and the federal? What's the difference between the two?
So yes, thanks, Deborah. The answer to your question is that the application process is the same for both the federal NSGP, the nonprofit security grant, as well as the state NSGP. Right now, the federal grant is open. So if you go onto our website, New Jersey Homeland Security.gov, click on the Interfaith tab, it'll scroll down to the grant. It has a listing of both the federal and the state grants. Additionally, we also have videos providing a breakdown of how the application process is proceeded. So to answer your question, yes, they both go through our office for the administrative side of things.
Thanks, Izzy. Do you happen to know, are there interfaith advisory councils in other states, or is it exclusive to New Jersey?
Far as I know, this is more a New Jersey thing. And one of the things I didn't mention earlier during my presentation with the Interfaith Advisory Council is that we meet 4 times a year on a quarterly basis. And as Director Carey had pointed out earlier, we met on the 15th. And the IAC is chaired by our director, Jared Maples. And part of the Interfaith Advisory Council is that we provide a current threat environment of what's going on now, grant information, other things like the 15th we discussed the current state of New Jersey in terms of the COVID situation and the process of going forward and opening up in the state of New Jersey. Additionally, one of the things the Deputy Director Carey had brought up was the Jersey City incident that occurred and his second day there. And I remember calling him on the day of the incident, and I wound up going out there at the command post. And Director Jared Maples always discussed this about blue skies days, right? And that's when we meet in those situations like the Interfaith Advisory Council and exchange information and talk amongst each other about that current threat environment. But when there is an incident, we don't need to do that. We have those relationships built up. And one of the things I remember is having a lot of the chaplains come out to that incident. And, you know, I turned around at the Jersey City precinct and I had 12 rabbi chaplains discussing, you know, hey, what resources do you need? We're here for you. We're here to help. I had the ADL call me and say, what do you need? The executive director at the time out of New York called me directly and said, what do you need? I'm going to come down there. What exactly do you need? So in addition to that, when there is an incident regarding the Interfaith Advisory Council, we do a conference call where we reach out to our Interfaith Advisory Council members and conduct a conference call. It's the director, Jared Maples, is on the call, along with the Attorney General, the Colonel of State Police, the Special Agent in Charge out of the Newark Field Office, as well as the Attorney General for New Jersey, providing a full transparent brief, obviously without providing sensitive information of what is going on, and together working collectively to mitigate those threats.
Hey, Debbie, it's Andy.
Hi.
Hey, Deb, I was going to say, if you have participants who are out of state, to reach out to their PSA, to that central email, and they can get connected with any interfaith councils that might be in their applicable state.
Right, and they just may not be called the same thing, and they may not do exactly the same thing. In New York, and it's for all of New York State, especially New York City, they have NIDIS, so New York Disaster Interfaith Services, and I know they probably have a similar membership, around 4,000 houses of worship, that they offer training and different opportunities to collaborate. And I would imagine that most states have something similar. Maybe it's not as good as Jersey, but something similar. But thanks for the tip with reaching out to the PSAs. Are PA systems included by chance in the nonprofit security grant? Is that an applicable item?
Good question. I believe that has been instituted in the grant for fiscal 2021. However, I can't say for sure. Whoever has that question, please reach out to me, and I will be more than happy to answer that question, reaching out to our grant bureau.
Okay, great. Thank you. If someone had a risk assessment 3 years ago, do they need to get another one?
Great question, Deborah. Actually, no. So I did speak to the Grants Bureau on this matter. They are accepting assessments that have been conducted 3 years ago. Generally, even going into about 5 years. I would certainly, do the self-assessment anyway, as well as using some of the DHS CISA assessments that Andrew had mentioned earlier. We do accept those as well, as Andrew had pointed out earlier.
Okay, so a self-assessment is acceptable.
So, well, yes, that's a minimum. And again, with that, there's no, point system that if you don't do a physical assessment using those resources with the local, state, county, and local partners, or the self-assessment, or even the federal assessment, there's absolutely no terms of getting a negative score on that if you use any one of those, or getting anything more on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. I don't know if you mentioned, but do you happen to have the deadlines to submit the application for the grant this year?
I believe that's located on our website. So again, if you go onto homelandsecurity.gov, click on the Interfaith tab and scroll down to where there's the grant information, that will provide all the information related to the deadlines and the processing and administration of the grants.
Okay, great. Someone asked if the grant funding was available in any state. From the federal level, it is available in any state, as long as the state acts as the agent. A house of worship cannot submit directly to FEMA. It has to go through their state. But I don't think that most states have a state program like New Jersey.
Hey, Deborah. Thank you. So as far as I understand, again, New Jersey is a little bit more on the forefront of that regarding the state grant. So the federal NSGP, which is the FEMA grant, that is available statewide, right? That's the federal pot.
Nationwide.
Nationwide, yes. That can, the House of Worship can access. In terms of the NJNSGP, that is only a New Jersey grant. And again, we have been working with our legislator and the governor into increasing those amounts as well.
Great, thank you. I think this might be for Krista. TeamViewer is a popular remote support tool. Does this present RDP exploitation or other risks?
So using any remote desktop provider. So TeamViewer, you can remote into somebody's computer that way. You can use that to remote into a network. There are secure ways of using those, and so they should have plenty of resources available online to guide you on what those security settings should be. And if they have, and I believe they do have multi-factor authentication optional or as an option, absolutely enable that so that somebody else can't use your TeamViewer credentials to then gain access into a network or into your system.
Thank you. Can you tell us, is there any way for a victim to recoup the money they lose?
So time is of the essence. If as soon as you figure out that you've been scammed, I would notify, you can notify us at the NJKIC, also notify the FBI as well as Secret Service. They're the ones who have the most resources available to help, particularly with wire transfers. This is kind of what I'm talking about here. If there is any sort of wire transfer that's been initiated, they're the ones who are going to be able to help you recoup that money. They have the most resources available. If it's if somebody has stolen your credit card information, you would go to your bank, let them know about that. You should be able to get your money back there. It all depends on the situation. If it's been like a long-term thing, it's going to be even harder to get that money back. So just make sure that you're letting somebody know as soon as possible when something like that happens.
Perfect. Thank you. Andy, one of our participants has a difference of opinion in their congregation. Some believe that locking the doors during services would increase security from a shooter. Others believe this would cut off potential exits for congregants. Are there any guidelines provided for this?
You know, that's a great question, and that's the part of the beauty of a team and working with the local police and even the fire departments. You know, locking emergency exits is usually a violation of any type of fire code. We have seen the main doors being locked in a church or a synagogue or a mosque during the service with ushers out who can provide early warning. That is a very difficult situation. I think you really need to talk with the local fire department so you're not violating fire code by locking doors. You should have emergency escape doors in your facility, and I would definitely recommend you get with your fire department and talk to them about it.
Thanks, Andy. The last two questions are virtually the same. We're being asked if the resources are available in New York. Are they available in Puerto Rico? I know for a fact that there are PSAs in both of those states. Does someone want to add?
So, Debbie, we have a Jose Gonzalez from Puerto Rico is a PSA for Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And as you know, in New York City and state, we have 5 to 6 PSAs assigned to Western New York to a couple in Manhattan. So we span the state. Just reach out to that central email, and they'll get in touch with the appropriate PSA.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And that concludes our question and answer. I just have a few closing slides before I hand the mic back over to Loretta. Everybody's contact information is on the screen. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We will be repeating tonight's program next Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. So if you know of any other houses of worship who maybe weren't able to join tonight, maybe they could join us next week. We have several programs coming up. We've been doing lots of webinars with subject matter experts on preparedness. So we have Ready Seniors and Healthy Homes coming up with HUD. We've been doing some great, Region 2 has been expanding some of the mitigation programs with these various guides. We are going to have an active shooter guidance for disability service providers, helping kids and teens build financial capability. April is Financial Capability Month. And you see all the various slides, webinars. I did mention earlier about Until Help Arrives, April 13th from 12 to 2 p.m. If you have an opportunity, please attend. You're welcome to share this information with all of your congregants. The more people that are able to assist in an incident, the more people that survive. I don't know, I don't think I mentioned earlier, but Until Help Arrives was actually born out of the Boston Marathon. There were so few lives lost because the family members and friends that were at the finish line were really able to help stop the bleeding, and that's what we need to do. So all of our upcoming webinars can be found at the first link. Today's recording and all our other recordings can be found at the second link. And if you don't already get FEMA Region 2 news, please subscribe. Or if you want to contact us with suggestions for future workshops that could assist the community, we're happy to do so. So with that, I'm going to turn the mic back over to you, Loretta.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I would like to thank you all for joining us this evening. We hope that everyone was able to capture the many resources and information offered tonight. We had up the contact page, so please feel free to reach out to any of the presenters tonight. This is not the end. This is the beginning of our engagement with everybody. I would like to thank our partners, DHS, and the Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office, and a very special thanks to FEMA for your partnership in hosting this seminar with us tonight. Before we close out, I would like to bring your attention to the download pod, where we have included a link which contains a video highlighting NJOHSP's See Something, Say Something campaign, encouraging everyone to report terrorism-related suspicious activity. There's a video on there that the director, Jared Maples, is on, so we would like for everybody to check that out. And also I wanted to talk about a Texas Engineering Extension Service who is sponsoring a multiple deliveries of a one-day virtual training course titled Active Shooter Exercise Development. This is no cost, and the description and the link for those classes are included in that link as well. So please continue to keep your eyes and ears open for upcoming trainings and webinars, as NJOHSP is always advertising new virtual-led training. And as Deborah indicated, we are doing this same time, same place next week. So if you do have colleagues or friends or family who were not here tonight, we're doing the same thing next week. So everyone, please be safe and enjoy the rest.